everyone. Thank you for joining today's presentation on the Vehicle Repair Program. My name is Olivia Burns. I'm the Education and Engagement Fellow for Clark County Department of Environment and Sustainability. Joining us today is Mary Titano, one of the department's senior air quality specialists. Before she begins, I wanted to let the audience know that this presentation has a closed captions available that can be translated into many languages. In order to access this feature, please click the CC button on the bottom of the presentation viewing screen, and then select from the drop-down menu the language of your preference. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, please put them in the chat box on the right side or below the presentation screen, and we will address those at the end. If you experience any technical difficulties, please try refreshing the page, commenting your issue in the chat box, or emailing support. This presentation is also being recorded and posted on our website for further viewing. Now I will gladly pass it over to Mary to get us started.
Thanks, Olivia. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for jumping in on our lunchtime presentation about Smog-Free Clark County, a vehicle repair pilot program by the Department of Environment and Sustainability through its Division of Air Quality. So the Division of Air Quality has one overarching mission, and that's to protect the air we share, right? And the division does that through its 4 sections. So we have permitting, compliance and enforcement, monitoring, and planning, which is where the section I work in, and that's where we come up with these different incentive programs to share with the community. So what are we doing here with Smog-Free Clark County? Okay, so the program in a nutshell. I think some of you may have heard Assembly Bill 349 has gone into effect. So that was passed last year and it went into effect this January 2023. And it effectively closed the classic car loophole. Hundreds, if not thousands of Clark County residents will be impacted, are currently being impacted by this rule change. And we're going to go into how the Division of Air Quality can help through this program, Smog-Free Clark County. So let's discuss a little of Assembly Bill 349 and what the facts are surrounding that. So it was passed, I think, either 2022, and then it became effective January 1st, 2023. And a couple of the different rule changes are that there will be no smog checks for new vehicles for 3 years. I believe the original or the law that was originally in effect was 2 years. So you bought a new car and you didn't have to get it smog checked for the first 2 years of new ownership. The second probably the most controversial or questionable, or not questionable, but people wonder about this particular piece of the legislation. It's the classic vehicle registration. So to get a classic vehicle plate, you now have to prove classic vehicle insurance on that vehicle, classic vehicle or antique vehicle insurance for that vehicle. In order to qualify for the classic vehicle plates, there are 3 kinds. We're going to go into that. And let's see who's impacted by this particular law. Okay. So if you have a classic vehicle plate on your plate today, and you don't carry antique or classic vehicle insurance on your vehicle, you are impacted as of January 1st. So what do those plates look like? You have the old timer plate, which is a vehicle that was manufactured 40 or more years ago. I believe these even include things like old motorcycles and different kinds of vehicles that are not typically seen on the road. So the likelihood that these old timer plates are attached to vehicles that actually are the antique vehicle genre, or they have antique vehicle insurance on them already, is pretty high. It's a pretty high likelihood. So then you also have the classic vehicle plate for vehicles that were manufactured 25 or more years ago. These vehicles have to also have original parts or duplicate original parts. So if you work on something and you just keep replacing the parts that go bad with duplicate original, then you probably are qualifying for a classic vehicle plate. And here's the classic rod, which is 20 or more years ago. And I think they can modify some of the parts. And there's, I think there's a weight limit as well. If you need to learn more about the different characteristics of these different plates, DMV has some great information on their website. All of these plates do not require the vehicle to pass an emissions test to get registered or renew the registration. So, and what are we targeting with this new legislation? Vehicles that are not classic. They're classic in name only. So the other requirements to get a classic vehicle plate or to have an emissions exemption are you have to not drive the vehicle 5,000 miles or more in a year. It can be used for commercial purposes. And I think that was it. Oh, and the age, of course, the age requirement. So those are all, I think, affidavit. You sign the affidavit and turn it into the DMV. And I mean, they're abiding by the law. So things like this, you know, you sign a form that says you're not using it for commercial purposes, but I think this yellow thing is a food truck, I think. Okay, so how did we get here? How did we get to a point where we're putting classic vehicle plates on a food truck? So this is a little timeline. 1965 is when the first federal vehicle emission standards became a thing, right? And in 1968, that's when they're going to start enforcing these emission standards with those model year vehicles. So the legislators gave the manufacturers 3 years to, you know, get their affairs in order to be able to meet these emission standards. And then in Nevada in 1997, an emissions exemption was allowed for restored vehicles. And in this rule, the restored vehicles were defined very well. And I believe if you actually read the rule, they had to pass an emissions test before they started their classic vehicle designation, the restored vehicle classification. So that was in 1997. And then in 2011, Assembly Bill 2 created a loophole by just getting rid of the definition of a restored vehicle. So all of the regulatory provisions were removed that define a restored vehicle. So keep that year in mind, 2011. So in 2023, AB 349 goes into effect and ends the loophole for classic vehicle registrations, and by requiring the classic vehicle insurance declaration page for registration. Okay, so let's look at some numbers. So now that you have an idea of how this came to be, let's look at some numbers. So the chart with all the yellow bars is the number of classic vehicle plates in Clark County, and those years on the bottom of that chart are the model years for those vehicles. So you have some, 68, 1969, 1970 vehicles, and it's pretty, it's not unreasonable. But then you get up to 1995, and there's a lot more classic vehicle plates on 95 vehicles. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there when you think in your head when you think of what a classic vehicle is. And so that's where the law was, that's where this AB 349 was kind of, it came about, was we're trying to mitigate all the emissions from these older vehicles that by the loophole that was created by AB 2 don't have to get emissions testing. Okay, so I told you to keep that year 2011 in your head. Well, if you look at the chart with the 3 colors, those are the number of classic vehicle and classic rod plates that were registered in all of Nevada, Clark County, and Washoe County. So if you look at that green line, in 2011, the number of classic vehicle plates went from 3,000 to, and then over the course of 4 years, it jumped to 20, roughly. So that was a huge jump and probably a red flag for a lot of legislators. And I think this AB 349 was is going to combat that. So where are these vehicles? This chart shows the number of vehicle registrations by district per month. So every month, those number of vehicles in those districts will be expiring, or these are the Class C vehicles that are expiring. Potentially, I would think half or 2/3 of these vehicles are going to need to pass emissions testing to get renewed here in Clark County. Some of these areas, Clark County includes areas that you don't require a smog check, kind of in the outskirts. But if you're driving around Las Vegas, you're going to need a smog check. Okay, so we know the numbers. We know where these vehicles are. How are we going to help? Okay, so through Smog-Free Clark County, if you can no longer qualify for a plastic plate and your vehicle fails a smog check, we may be able to help you with your emissions-related repairs. So what are the goals of our program? So this program is a pilot, and it's only going from January 2023 to December 2023. We don't have an unlimited budget, so we had to figure out how to maximize our money and help the people that needed it most. And the overarching goal, again, as I said previously, is to improve the air quality in Clark County, improve the air quality for our residents, protect the air we share. And so another goal, a big one, was to provide financial assistance to eligible vehicle owners for those emission-related repairs. Hopefully, they might be using the classic vehicle loophole because they can't afford the repairs required to pass a smog check. And you know what? When you have kids to take to school, food to put on the table, and a job you have to get to, sometimes those vehicle repairs are way low on your priority list. So that's why Smog-Free Clark County is jumping in here to try to help mitigate that hardship. And so we just want to keep our residents on the road, right? Everybody go to work, get your kids to school, do your grocery shopping, and then this is how we're going to do it, or we're going to try to do it. We can't help everybody with everything, but this is a piece. So the program overview. So you fail a smog check. You submit an application through, we have a live application portal. Your eligibility will be determined. We'll go over that in a minute. A voucher will be issued to you, and you'll go to a specific smog shop that is assigned to your vehicle, depending on where you are and how quickly they can get to your repair. And then hopefully, after all those repairs are made, you will pass a smog and successfully renew your vehicle and go about your day. So I discussed eligibility. So there are income requirements for the program. We used categorical qualification. So if you qualify for federal or state programs such as SNAP, there's also the Water and Sewer Assistance Program. There's a couple of others that I'm drawing a blank on. The Energy Assistance Program, the TANF, I don't know if Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. So those, you submit those documents. We have a list of the approval documents or the notices of decision, and so we can verify your eligibility that way. Your vehicle must be 95 or older. We're focusing on these dirtier cars in these underserved areas. So we're finding that a lot of these vehicles are 95 and older, and if we don't meet our, if there aren't enough 95 or older vehicles to repair, then we can bump up that, we can think about bumping up that model year ceiling, maybe further along the program or in the next iteration of the program, if there is one, if the pilot is successful. The vehicle must be registered in Clark County, in one of the zip codes of Clark County that require a smog check to renew the registration. So your failed emissions test from a DMV authorized facility within the last 12 months will be required. You'll have to upload that document as well. And your vehicle cannot be used for commercial purposes. And the link to Smog-Free Clark County is just listed there as kind of a side. I'll have a QR code at the end of the slideshow. Let's see. So let's wrap this thing up and discuss, okay, AB 349 closed the classic vehicle loophole. So now antique or classic vehicle insurance is required to qualify for an emissions exemption through the DMV in areas of Nevada that require a smog check to register your vehicle. The law went into effect January 1st, 2023. And Smog-Free Clark County is going to try to provide financial assistance to those eligible vehicle owners for emissions-related repairs. And I think, so now Olivia is going to tie all this in to how our all-in efforts have been going with Clark County.
Great, thank you, Mary, for sharing about the vehicle repair program and how it contributes to a smog-free community. As I go over the all-in program and how it relates to the program Mary just presented on, you could go ahead and add any questions you have in the chat, and then we will get to those very soon. All-in Clark County is a dual phase plan led by the Department of Environment and Sustainability, and it is focused on addressing climate change trends and contributions within county operations and in our broader community. There are 5 key areas in the county operations plan. The one we are focused on today is sustainable transportation, and the overall goal in that area is to reduce vehicle emissions. As we can see here on the left, 78.2% of our community relies on personal vehicles, which creates 50% of transportation-related GHGs. This is the region's second largest sector of emissions. As county employees, the average distance we commute to work is about 30 miles, which accounted for 23% of all Clark County's greenhouse gas emissions in 2019. And that is all coming from just us employees. Just as emissions from the transportation sector increase climate change, climate hazards can negatively impact transportation systems and the people who utilize them. There are many ways to commute more friendly to collectively reduce emissions in our community, such as the vehicle repair program or commuting alternatives like a 4-day work week, working from home, and carpooling. So that was just a quick overview on how the vehicle repair program aligns with the All-In initiative to help reduce greenhouse gases. Now back to Mary, and I will pull up your questions.
The QR code on here is for the Smog-Free Clark County website. And then there's also our Clark County Department of Environment and Sustainability link for more information. As we move along with the program, hopefully we can update everyone on its successes. And every day we're working to get the program just to have it run smoothly without hitches, not the car kind.
All right, we do have a few questions coming in.
Okay.
The first one is, does every county in Nevada need to abide by this law?
Every county in Nevada needs to abide by this law. However, every county in Nevada does not require smog emissions testing, so smog checks for registration. It depends on your location and your zip code. Usually if you're in a metropolitan area, so Reno will require a smog check and Las Vegas will require a smog check. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Does the district you live in considered when reviewing applications? Are you focused on a certain district first?
We're focused on where these vehicles are. So the data that I showed you in the presentation was from June 2022. So depending on how those vehicles, where those vehicles are, how those are spread around the county, it looks like a lot of these vehicles are district B, and E, I believe. So we're not necessarily focusing on those areas. We're not going to turn away someone who meets all the criteria and lives not in District A. We're not going to turn them away. But we are noticing a trend in where these vehicles are. And you saw, I think it's E, District E. So a lot of these older non-emissions tested vehicles are driving around those areas. So what does that mean? That means your community is going to have pretty terrible air quality in the with all those polluting vehicles driving around the streets over there. So that's kind of a non-answer, but we're those eligibility criteria. So income, your vehicle age, and those other things. Those were all, we were going to stay focused on those eligibility criteria.
Great. I think you addressed this also, but another question was, is this program first come, first serve?
It will. So the way we budgeted for the repairs was we allotted money, an equal portion of the entire budget for every month, because people are expiring and they may not know that their vehicles are going to require emissions testing, or they're going to lose their classic vehicle exemption. So we budgeted to be able to help people every month. And as you know, as the program ramps up, some of that money from the previous month may roll over, or we may max out. And so we don't have that many. We haven't had repairs done yet. We've had interest, and we're evaluating applications, but there are no repairs done. So once we get those numbers, we'll kind of know what the budget is. And initially, yes, it is first come, first serve for the eligible residents, vehicle owners.
Is there a deadline to apply, or does this program have a close?
We will be accepting applicants through December.
Great. And then there's just another question, is which climate hazards affect the transportation sector? I could address that one. So extreme heat, of course, here our summers are very hot, which can lead to wildfires. We also experience flooding here. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen our roads be closed due to flooding. That also can damage infrastructure. And then we have to think about those community members or our staff who rely on transit and bike infrastructure to commute to work and other critical services. But I'll refresh the page and see if there's any more questions coming in. And if you have any other questions, you could see here Mary's contact information, and then that link and QR code will take you to some more information where you could also get your questions answered there. So thank you all again for engaging in today's presentation, and very special thank you to Mary for sharing all of her expertise and the program with us. Again, the recording of this presentation will be available to view on our website within the next few days. So thank you, everybody.